I'm not saying all of them are qualified, because you check but the ones that are going off to college, is there a way to tap into that resource to say, okay, you're going off to college for 4 years, whatever the case may be, how about coming back and being a police officer in your city? Have you tapped into that resource?
Yes, we do. We actually do active recruiting at college fairs and job fairs, basically trying to target that area. There are incentives. There is a percentage of pay, whether you have an associate's, a bachelor's, or a master's, above and beyond the base salary of a police officer as an incentive. Unfortunately, again, we're in competition with other municipals or other towns that start off at a higher rate of pay. The balance to that is, again, where are you actually going to have that street experience and be a police officer to actually learn and advance and have the training opportunities and basically do what you want to do. We do target the college individuals. We go to job fairs to target unemployment. Again, one of the basic requirements for the Hartford Police Department is a high school diploma. Most departments within this area do not have that minimum. They want or require at least 12 college credits. We don't require that. Whether it's a high school diploma or a
Is
GED.
it because we set our bar low? Is that what it is, that we're not, why we're not, you're saying, other towns have more or something like that, and they can get these guys? Or how are we looking in general at, okay, we start them off at, say, $10, and another town start them off at 15 or 20. Do we look at other towns and see where
try
we
to stay
can?
competitive?
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. It's difficult financially for us to stay competitive. Do we lower the bar? I don't know if that's a great way to put it. Maybe we value the city resident. We put a greater value on having a city resident come aboard than we do on 12 credits at the local community college. So that's why we target the audience.
Yes.
And I think you have to be realistic on that too. If you're trying to get Hartford residents and some kids who haven't had the greatest educational opportunities, and it may be a real issue to get the money for them to go on to college, people that are applying in the suburbs may come from households where education is not an issue. They've already gone to college, they're getting out, they're looking for a career. So I wouldn't agree with you say lowering the bar. I think we're looking for people that have local life experience, that have had negative interactions with police officers and know what needs to be done to change that and to be treated how they would want to be treated. And it could be that, a police officer said something to you didn't like, and you say, I don't want to live with it. I want to go be part of the change.
And I know the chief and, his department has been working really tirelessly to make sure that those things are not happening, because yes, I mean, I'm so heavily involved with Hartford High, and lots of those young people I would try to encourage to get involved with the police department, but it's this attitude, oh no way, I don't want to be that, they're the only, no, that attitude of, they're that, and so how do we
have
change?
a bit of a stigma.
Yes.
All right, so it starts out with like the YPI she talked about. It starts out with Project Longevity and PAL, committing to the kids at a younger age, as opposed to sitting in a cruiser and being detached from the city. We want the officers involved in PAL. We want the officers involved in Project Longevity. We want them out there in the community getting involved. Our CSOs, our youth, anything related to any of our youth initiatives, our faith-based initiative. We want the cops out there. So is it going to change overnight?
No.
Certainly not. But it's that long-term commitment. Again, and it comes back to sustainability, like you said. How long can we keep these programs up? Chief's committed, mayor's committed, as best we can to try to move these projects forward and keep them going for a long time. Would you agree?
I agree, and just simply going back to setting the bar, as Kevin mentioned earlier, a police officer in Hartford, and I'm going to say in a week, your first week on patrol, you actually see more than your average suburban police officer.
Right.
Hopefully not, but that's the reality.
Well, of
With
course,
that being
we know
said,
that.
we provide that training, which is very important. We have our own in-house academy. A lot of our police officers, if they have not been field training officers, they are. Even the young officers, we provide training quarterly, on a monthly basis. Really, we're updated, and we do so because our level of call volumes and laws change, et cetera. So we have to basically address, 300 plus officers and make sure that each case is followed through from A to Z in a competent manner. So yes, how do we demystify that? We basically say, you know what, we've been there. I had negative experiences with the police. What did I do? I didn't go against the police. I basically put on the uniform and made that change. This is why I'm here. This is why we're here. The lieutenant guided hockey program. Way back when, we have one of our candidates.
Yep, Terrell Jenkins, a good kid. He was a West End kid. He was in our program, and we tried to act as a role model for him. He's on the job now, and one heck of a good cop. So a lot of success stories, though. It's not just
I think part of the problem with that, though, unless you go to Hyacinth's NRZ or other groups like that, I would say the majority of the residents' interaction with police officers is going to be negative, just because of the nature of the beast. They either get called to your house for a noise complaint or a domestic, or they pull you over because you weren't driving right or something like that. Very few times do you have an interaction with a police officer where they say, geez, you're doing great. I just wanted to say hello. But,
Yeah,
So it's a type of thing where it happens very quick. You get turned off to the police because they look at you the wrong way, they're having a bad day. I remember when I moved back to Hartford, the number of police officers said, what are you, crazy? Why do you want to live in Hartford? I don't hear that as much anymore, and I don't think you'll find two people that will sing the praises of Chief Ravella much more than us. But with that being said, you can also notice a huge difference. When you go to community meetings, it's not a complaint fest about the police. It's like, geez, we love working with that lieutenant. We call him, things get done. Our CSO is terrific. They actually respond when we call them. So it's like the attitude is changing.
It is, and it has to. It also takes the leadership. Because if you send off the wrong message about your officers, then everybody in the room is going to think, oh well, that officer is not, And I think so. It's really important for leadership. It's really important for that relationship. We have a great relationship with our guys in the South End. Okay, I can't sing.
But that doesn't happen on its own.
But we want to make sure it happens all over the city. Okay. The other quick thing I wanted to also mention: how about if the chief in the roll call in the morning says, "Okay, guys, I want you to go out there all happy today, whatever. We know it's a stressful thing, but I want you all going out there today, and I want you to meet one friend, meet one kid. Say, come back and tell me, how many people have you met today?"
And then they sing
Okay.
Kumbaya.
that's been tried. Okay, exactly what you're saying.
What happened?
Mark Paulino.
Oh yeah, my
Make one
father.
We all love him.
Yeah.
So I love
the
it.
community contact.
Yeah.
We don't want to force our guys to do that, because then it opens itself up to people faking it, not doing the right thing. What Chief Ravella is trying to do is instill an overall philosophy in all our cops, the way we go about our job, to make us want to go into the community and get involved. And you're seeing that, genuinely seeing that now. So as opposed to forcing it, it's been tried. It wasn't overly successful. I think it's an overall philosophical, long-term commitment to change and getting us more involved in the community, period.
Well, and it's a mindset too. And unfortunately, there's a few Chief Ravella with his transparency, that's what's building trust in the community.
Yep.
And firsthand when I called him last week about something negative, and he was very open about it, gave me a quote for the blog and everything else, and didn't try to hide it. And I've dealt with several administrations in the past that never wanted to air their dirty laundry. It eventually gets out there, the community hears about it, and it looks like a cover-up when it does. To build that trust, you need to be upfront and get the word out there. And no organization is perfect. We've got problems in the fire department, police department, DPW, no matter where you look. But we're all human beings. You hire human beings. Until we start hiring robots, you're going to have problems.
That's what we're dealing with, is
And
the
that's-
human element. But
yeah.
Chief Ravella is hyper vigilant about not covering things up, about being completely open. He's allowed us to essentially rebrand who we are and open ourselves up.
He's
to
probably
the
cleaned
community.
house by correcting more problems than normally we're just bounced around from area to area.
And not hiding.
Yeah.
And putting it out there, which is very important. Puts it up to the officers too. It used to be hidden from us as well, and now it's out to you and the community. Our business is your business. You should know about it, and that's all there is to it. So, without giving up investigative
Right,
details
yeah,
and
right.
certain things like that could investigate an investigation. So,
Right.
very open to that. And that's a great point, and huge with building trust. That's why we tell you guys about the things that happen in an department. It's communication and building trust, period.
And you address it and you move on,
Yep.
but let's go back to one of the things I brought up before. We've heard a lot lately with a new hire that the mayor was trying to make, and he came up with the second chances because the individual had several felony arrests and did prison time and things like that. Now, not to be blunt about it, but if you're looking to apply to be a police officer, there is no second chances. And that's that's basically by state statute and post. And they say, what kind of trouble could you have gotten in the past and still be considered? I don't think there's too many things. There's some misdemeanors.
She
and
worked
things
in
like that.
background, so she can give us the full rundown
So
on it.
to a person that wants to be a police officer, and I know there's so many pressures on the kids in the city to, either be part of the gangs as their
Or get
second
involved in
family,
drugs.
get involved in drugs, things like that. What will prevent you from being a police officer?
A felony arrest, a conviction. Some arrests, when you're a youthful offender, that's part of the youthful offender program with the criminal justice system, where basically that file is sealed after you become an adult. So let's be realistic about that. But convictions and felonies that are more serious juvenile offenses, that will prohibit you from becoming a police officer. And although unfortunate, and we would like to give that second chance, let's face it, police officers are held to a very high standard of ethics. And we're
Or
exposed.
try to be?
We don't have that.
Correct.
This is something we created. This is a post standard.
Yeah, I know,
state
this is
standard
post
that
standard,
we
it's
have
state
no
statute.
leeway on. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's okay. So the Connecticut State Police Officer Standards, there's a council, and basically they have a book, this they, and they submit these standards, and this is statewide. They use a lot of data nationwide. Based on our standards and our training mimics most of the state other police departments. We do have our municipal codes, but overall we're mandated by the state.
And that's good. We need to keep our standard. It's really important for us to keep our standard.
Well, we've got a few other things that address the standards, like the Cintron Vaughn consent decree. That mandates that every police officer has to go qualify at the range 4 times a year, where most other towns are once. So there's a lot of things that play into training, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The more proficient somebody is with a handgun, the better
Right.
off when they need to use it. But there is a lot where there's flexibility, but there's also some things that just can't change. And that's where it's important for kids in Hartford that are even considering a career. You gotta, as difficult it is, you have to avoid the peer pressure. Don't go for a ride in that stolen car. Don't hold somebody's gun for them while they're going to do something else. There's just so many things that kids get drawn into and may turn out to be great adults, but once you get that on your record, the game's over.
So then that goes back to, I remember when Chief Barry was chief at the time, a couple of years ago, one of the issues we talked about, because again, I was very involved with, I'm still involved with them, was very involved with the high schools, and we talk about the same thing over and how do we keep our kids out of trouble and stuff like that. And one of the things we talked about was to get an officer in the school, and that officer would be almost like making sure that whether it's a monthly base or whatever the case may be, they're assembling the kids, talking to them about what is, what could be, and how they could be, and try to keep them on a straight and narrow path. So anyway, we actually did get that grant years and years, and then we have these officers in the schools. But then it turned out that these officers in the school weren't doing those things. Some of them were just waiting for these kids or the teacher to call and said, hey, come and get Johnny out of here. I don't want him in here. He's bad, or da-da-da. So there were no more education, and I'm trying to figure, and I know the chief, I'm not sure how much he's working with the superintendent, and I know the superintendent is going to be gone soon, but I'm hoping that the next superintendent come on, that he'll be working closely with these superintendent and principals to say, hey, this should be a part of the curriculum. I am coming in once a month. We're going to have an assembly. We want to talk to our young people in school, because these are things that we're talking about, recruitment and stuff like that. But we can't recruit them if these kids have this wall up against officers and the conception about what officers do.
But see, Hyacinth, not to interrupt you,
Go ahead.
but, so you don't get involved in the political aspect of this. Part of the problem was with police officers in school, there was never a memo of understanding of what they were there for and what their role was. Chief Ravella addressed that, and I believe there is an MOU now, even though most of them are out of the schools. But that created problems where a lot of principals saw the officer in the school as a disciplinarian. A kid acts up, they don't do anything about it, they want the cop to come in and take action.
Right.
So now that kid has a negative interaction with the police, and potentially, however they react, they have a police record because of it.
Right.
And
So-
that's not what our officers should be in schools as role models and mentors.
Exactly,
We've
and that
mapped
was
them
the
out.
intent.
All right, so Chief Ravella's done that, and what he recognizes is what's, essentially the pipeline from schools to our prison system. And like Kevin said, our cops were in there acting as a disciplinarian. Well, Chief Ravella's cleared it up with the school system. We're not here to do the teacher's
Right.
job. We've backed our officers out of the schools
Mhm,
essentially,
and that's
and their
good.
discipline role in there.
Mhm.
And you see our juvenile arrests are down historically low.
Right.
Thus, we're not arresting our students, we're not having them have bad interactions with the police at a younger age, we're not introducing them to the criminal justice system as we were before at a much slower rate. So we recognize that pipeline. The chief's made great strides in stopping it. I think we're down like 25% this year, and in the school systems, I'm sure our arrests got to be down in the 50 to 70% range, just guessing off the top of my head. So we're going in that direction. He recognizes that there's a lot of good things going on, so hopefully these kids, when they get older, they want to be cops, they want to invest in the community,
Yeah.
they come aboard the police
Right,
department.
but I definitely would like to see where that officer, once a month, assembly the kids, just going to enforcement, come in for maybe a half an hour, just say what it's like, what it is that, we want to see and what we would like for you to be, or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. That's what I'm looking
Or
for.
even in the cafeteria lunchtime, to interact with the kids
Yep.
and talk to them, so they have positive experiences. But,
Certainly.
there's a ways to go on that.
Yep.
Just, do you know offhand, I think it's like 40 to 45 police officers that live in the city now, which is less than 10% of the department. Do you have any idea how many?
None, I have no idea. I can certainly research.
The last I knew, it was like 45 officers that actually lived in Hartford.
Yeah.
And that's something else I think the city should look at, is an incentive to get officers to live in the city. We've
Yeah,
got
but-
so many abandoned and blighted buildings. A new police officer, or even a current police officer, get in that building. You agree to live there, there's nothing that's gonna bring more stability to a neighborhood than having a police officer live there.
Yeah, but also you have to think, you have to think like the officers. I'm an officer out there, I'm arresting the bad guys. You know what, those bad guys know where I live in the city and, so they have their,
Those bad guys can find out where Brian lives, where Gigi lives, in a heartbeat.
I know, but it's
Yeah.
much
So
Times have
easier.
changed.
Yeah, it's much easier, more target when they're living.
I agree, it's a
And I can
double-edged sword.
understand that
And nobody
part.
wants to live in a neighborhood and have the neighbor come knocking on their door at 11 o'clock at night saying, hey, the upstairs apartment is loud, you're a police officer, can you go do something? But it also,
It's a balance here.
well, it's a balance, but it's something worth looking at.
I think as you see, as we improve as a department and as a city together, I think you'll see those residencies going up. I know it's improved in the last 10 years, but I couldn't give you a number. That's not something I've researched.
So, any idea how many openings you'll have this year? I know they keep moving it back.
40 to 50 or so, I'd
It's supposed to
say
be
at
back to
least.
July now, it was supposed to be March or April, now I think it's off to July.
Yep.
But, didn't we just get a COPS grant?
Yes, for 10 laterals. You know the technicals are probably better than I am.
Yes, we do have a COPS grant for 10 laterals, and we're looking at additional 20 recruits, which would total at that first class to 30, which should have taken place in April and now has been since pushed to July.
And again, not to get you into the political aspect of it, but this is something the council needs to wake up to, is the number of openings that are happening on a weekly basis now, with officers leaving, and they want to talk about overtime.
Are they in La La Land maybe? They may be in La La Land.
I would call it something else, but
Okay.
Brian started to squirt, so don't go after the council here.
Well, no, I'm not going on, because you know me, I'm going to the council and letting them know
But they-
that this is a reality, they need to get checked themselves because of what's going on, they
I think
need
he's
to
getting ready,
know.
he's getting ready to tase you under the table.
No.
But no, if you want to be real, you can't tell the chief, cut your overtime budget, when you're putting lieutenants in patrol cars to fill vacancies. It just doesn't make sense. Plus, there's also the repercussions, like in my neighborhood, I have a walk beat. He's actually on a bike, but he's very aggressive in the quality of life issues, whether it's panhandling, loitering, things like that. And if he's in his beat now 1 day a week, I'd be surprised, because they take him to fill a car in the West End. And you can notice the panhandlers,
The
that, you know,
difference.
you get out of your car, they're coming, hey, you got 50 cents, you got $1. Now, they wouldn't do that if my
If you
walkie
had-
officer was there, because first thing, I would pick up the phone and call him, and he'd be there within a minute and a half and address it. So, as much as we talk about quality of life and police staffing and things like that, you have to walk the walk, you know. And I know you released some great numbers a couple weeks ago, as far as crime being down. The homicides weren't changed too much, I think it was one less.
One more.
One more, okay.
Okay.
But immediately, after those numbers get
One more when
released,
compared to a very great year that we had in,
well, one of those
last
was a
year.
police shooting too,
Well, the same
which
year
is-
before.
which is
We had one
considered a
more,
homicide.
generally. Yes, and we
even
had-
though it's legitimate and everything else, it's still considered a homicide. But the council loves those numbers when they're released and shows, geez, Hartford's getting safer. But it
And then
doesn't,
when they get safer, what do they do?
let's cut the police
Cut back
department
the
budget.
police
We don't need
department
to-
money. That's what they do.
It's
Well,
just-
let's go back to recruiting before we get two people in trouble.
Yeah.
But, now, one of the other things we've heard a lot about is the Criminal Justice Academy that was supposed to be opened in one of the high schools. Is that going anywhere, or is it still just talk?
It's just open
Chief's aware of that.
Enfield.
Do you know anything about it? I know he's aware that he wants it in Hartford.
But
We
it's in
want it
Enfield, I think.
I think,
Yeah, that's
It
in the
is.
political realm, that, you know, I think we'd all here at the table would agree to have that in Hartford, would
You
be
go
best
where the
case
need is.
scenario for us.
You know, it's-
Right, I mean, let's face it, the reality is that it is in Enfield, so where would you collaborate with Enfield Police? How does that
Because
help,
they're picked first,
help,
whatever.
you know, our department and,
And most police departments are very territorial, whether they admit it or not.
right, and the
You're on our
pricing is still
turf.
different, although they're following the same state mandate municipally and culturally, it's still different.
But you also have to look at the amount of kids that actually is from Hartford that's in the academy. So you could probably tap into those regardless of,
Now,
you
Do
know.
Hartford residents get any priority in hiring? You know, I know like with military, they give so many points and things like that.
There is an affidavit and there is an incentive. Their application, they actually do get a certain amount of points within the application process per se. I know that when I came on, there was a residency requirement, point blank, serious. And that was great in terms of representing the minority candidates, but even still, our class was still predominantly Caucasian.
Well,